Hi guys, welcome to the Challenge Podcast, the show dedicated to transforming your life. I'm Coach Steve.
And I'm Coach Helen, and we're excited to bring you the best information on exercise, nutrition, mindset and health. Let's get on with the show.
What's up guys, Coach Steve here and welcome back to another episode of the Challenge Podcast. Today I'm joined with Dr. Brian Dixon from Lifevantage from Utah in the States. Brian, welcome to the Challenge Podcast.
Yeah, hey, thanks Coach Steve for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Mate, I'm so excited to spend some time chatting with you. But mate, would you like to start by telling us a little bit about Lifevantage? What is that and what do you do with Lifevantage?
Yeah, Lifevantage is a very interesting new nutrition company. We're the world's leader in Nutrigenomics and also the largest biohacking company in the world. So we're, a relatively small player in the nutritional space at around $250 million in revenue, but we're a global multinational company. And it's just been an amazing journey for me. So I'm their senior vice president of research and development. So I really oversee all their product development, all the research studies that they do. And then I've got a minor role as well as in brand management. So I also manage the brand management team, which is really fun. But when you take all that together, at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is I get to make the products for myself and make products that I really want to take for myself.
Yeah, wow. So when you're saying products, what do you mean by that? Are you saying like a supplement or what do you mean by a product?
Yeah, we've got a lot of traditional supplements as well, fish oils. We've got a fitness line as well. You can probably guess what's in there. Protein is the flagship there. We do skincare, hair care. But really where the core of our business is this nutrigenomics space. And nutrigenomics is a pretty big word, I know, but if you break it down into its simple parts, it's really just utilizing nutrition to really unlock the power of the genes that we have inside of our bodies. So, we possess hundreds, if not thousands of genes that are just absolutely essential for survival that have also been shown to be controlled by various mechanisms. And one way you can unlock those mechanisms is by utilizing especially compounds from plants to turn these things on and really kind of prime your cells so that they can really live their best life, which means that we can live our best lives.
Wow. Now, Brian, you've got a Ph.D. in molecular and cellular biology from Oregon State University, and you've written a whole bunch of peer-reviewed published papers. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on at the moment? Are you conducting any studies at the moment?
Yeah, we've got a number of studies going on. So we do obviously a lot of genetic studies because we're trying to investigate the role that these various nutrients can have in unlocking these various genes. We've got a human clinical study going on right now, just looking at kind of our latest product that's centered around NAD levels. I'm not sure if your listeners may or may not be aware of kind of what NAD is. It's a pretty hot topic, and we've taken a pretty unique approach to be able to not just affect NAD levels, but more specifically targeting the specific things, the biochemistry, the molecular biology inside of the cell that this increase in NAD levels can have. Something else we're going down the path right now is kind of looking for these next generation of fitness trackers, if you will. And I think the data is pretty clear that the more that we're tracking things, whether it's your diet, your exercise, or other health measures, the better that you're set up for success. And you really, this whole game of fitness and trying to lose weight, get into shape, it's not really a guessing game. We've known this science for decades, if not 100 years. So the more you can track, the more you know what you're doing, the more you know what you're putting in your body, the more successful you're going to be in whatever your health journey might be.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love the idea of quantifying fitness, and as wearable devices such as we've got Fitbit and Garmin here in Australia, and smartphones are becoming more and more advanced, and even like Oura rings and such becoming more mainstream and popular. I think that's going to be the next step in fitness and health and transforming bodies around the world, is to start finding out what we should be tracking and then how to manipulate that as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Exactly. So what is the things that we should be tracking that are the most important? You mentioned Garmin. I'm a huge fan of their ecosystem, and, they've been really, I think, at the forefront in a lot of ways of some of these health measures, whether it's sleep, quality of sleep, your movement. I love that ecosystem. And we're just looking at taking that to the next level. And there's some really interesting endpoints that we think very easily, non-invasively measured that are just great measures of overall health and well-being. So that's something that's got me personally very excited about what we're doing at Lifevantage.
Me personally, my background is in more movement, and I'm studying osteopathy here in Australia. And I'm really fascinated with some of the gyroscope technologies. I think one is called Move. And it's basically a device you can wear that can start to detect your body movement, and we can start to utilize that to see ranges of motion in the shoulder joint. And then we could put it on swimmers, for example, and see how they're swimming and their range of motion in the shoulder to prevent injuries and such. So I wonder how that's going to correlate into the fitness space. And then we could track maybe a running tempo and cadence and such for maybe a general population person moving forward. And then we can coach people through AI technology. I'm really excited for the future. It's going to be really cool.
That's really cool. I mean, I have a background in competitive swimming, so I really appreciate that. It's maybe it's big in Australia, isn't it? So in the States, it's definitely an underappreciated sport. But yeah, we're all becoming pseudo robots, aren't we? I mean, slowly one device at a time.
Yeah. Well, Brian, mate, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about biohacking, and I wanted to talk a little bit about, trying to find things that we could manipulate, or different variables we could manipulate in our day-to-day life to optimize our nutrition and our performance and overall our lifestyle. But, talking about biohacking, sometimes we hold on to that word hacking and we go, well, we're going to hack something. What are we hacking? So do you have a definition of biohacking and what that means when someone says that to you?
Yeah, for sure, Coach Steve. A lot of people do. They have one or two reactions when they hear that word biohacking. They're either intrigued and they might know a little bit about it, or that word hack just turns them off right from the beginning. I think it probably comes back to computer hackers and all the maliciousness that they're doing. But in a lot of ways, that word is the same. We're trying to hack into the biological system. And, the simple definition of biohacking is just trying to optimize your biology. So getting in there, trying to optimize that biology that we already have inherent in every cell in our bodies. Our cells, our bodies are just amazing machines, the most complex machines on the face of this earth. My brother's into artificial intelligence. And he's saying in our lifetime that there will never be a computer that can match the computing capacity that's inside of our brains. And so this word biohacking, what we're really trying to do is just unlock the massive human potential that we have. And it can be simple things, and then it can be some things that are just absolutely bonkers that even myself wouldn't even think about touching.
Yeah, okay. Well, if we were going to take the very beginner basic foundation steps, what kind of first thing could somebody look at to try to start to optimize their health?
Yeah, and I might just sound like I'm giving my grandma's recommendations, but I think, going back to the basics and maybe kind of back to my first point that we've known, for decades, if not 100 years, what the human body has needed to function optimally. I mean, some interesting statistics, but, the last essential vitamin ever discovered was vitamin B12, and that was discovered back in 1948. So if you think about that, we've literally known for 70 years everything that the human body needs to function. And then what we're trying to do is just take that baseline knowledge and then just continue to optimize. But when it comes down to what people can do, I mean, if you're not doing, in my mind, these 6 things, at least these 6 things, anything else you're doing on top of it's not going to do you much good. It all starts with the things we hear and the things that you're preaching is just movement and exercise. I mean, we're amazing. What the shoulder can do, the range of motion and how it all holds together is just a biomechanic miracle. And our bodies are very minimalistic. Every pound or kilogram that we're carrying around, it costs us massive amounts of energy. So our bodies want to be at this very minimalistic state. So we have to just keep moving and using our bodies in the way that they were intended. I mean, just sitting at our office jobs all day long now is just not cutting it. So get out, use your beautiful bodies. Nutrition, I probably don't have to preach to this crowd, but you got to eat right. I mean, I wish that even we had a quick fix or a magic bullet, but man, fruits and vegetables, you literally cannot stuff enough of those fruits and vegetables in your faces. Something maybe we can come back to, but a very interesting notion is community and how important community is. And I know that sounds a little bit weird, but it looks like more and more that the more we're getting together with friends, family, loved ones, the better our health outcome is going to be. And, we have this one beautiful life. We may as well live it to our fullest. Something I kind of consider maybe a little bit of a lost frontier, but something that's starting to resurface is sleep. For years and years, scientists thought that our brains basically turned off when we were asleep. And, to their surprise, when they started putting these various scanning devices on their brains, and the brain just comes alive at night. And in fact, the brain only weighs about 3 pounds or just a little bit over a kilo. It's It's unbelievable. It consumes about 20% of all the resources, whether it's calories, oxygen, blood flow, and that's all day, every day, including when we're sleeping. So something really important is going on when we're sleeping, especially for brain health. Something I'd encourage your listeners and all of your clients is, man, stop waking up to an alarm. If you can stop waking up to an alarm, which I know means you have to go to bed earlier, maybe, I promise it'll change your life and just how you're ready to attack the world every day. Mindfulness would be my fifth, kind of another interesting, maybe obscure notion, but just kind of the notion of being present. Being present when you're eating food, being present when you are together with your friends and families. I mean, I know we're doing this digitally, but really technology in a lot of ways is getting in our way and is distracting from being present. I mean, how many of us are guilty about just going through some drive-through restaurant or some quick takeaway and just we're stuffing it in our faces as we're going to the next place? We're not thinking about the nutritional value or the calories that are in it. So just be mindful, be present literally in everything you do. And then lastly, and my hat's off to all my Australian friends down there, but something that we're not so good at, I would say, in the US is just like environment. So what is your environment? We can obviously be talking about the outside environment, but quite frankly, a lot of us don't have a lot of control over what's going on in the environment. Of course, there's things that we can all individually do, but if we feel like we don't have a lot of control out in our outside environment, maybe we need to think about our environment, whether it's inside our homes. For me, for example, something that's really important to me is I just don't eat off of plastic. So we eat off of glass plates and drink out of glasses. Those exposures, whatever they might be, I think are also going to be proven out to be pretty detrimental down the road. So, what are the products that you're putting on your skin? What are you washing your hair with? These exposures add up over time. So maybe it's not the environmental pollution, but, we can really be polluting ourselves on the inside. And just maybe one more point to environment, but there's been study after study that's shown that our environment inside of our home in terms of air quality can be tens of times worse than just even some of the most polluted days that we experience in the outside world.
Yeah, wow. So you kind of gone through a nice list of 6 things we can do. And you're right, like some of them seem very almost obvious. You're like, oh, well, yeah, okay, I need to eat good food, I need to exercise, I need to sleep. But I guess sometimes we miss out on those basics and we get kind of caught up on lots of really complicated things when we kind of forget that, oh, well, I need to sleep or I need to be present. I need to think about my environment. But I kind of wanted to speak a little bit about each one. And I wanted to start with movement and exercise. And when we think about movement and exercise, and you kind of mentioned it where we want to try to stay lean and stay as light as we could be. In Australia, we have kind of like our Australian fitness guidelines of about 180 minutes a week of moderate to intense type of exercise. In your eyes, what would you prescribe someone in terms of movement? What would you prioritize? Simply going for a walk or doing resistance training or like HIIT style training? Like what do you see as something that we should prioritize?
Yeah, I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think you have to meet people where they're at. I mean, if somebody is, many, many kilos overweight, for them to go out and expect to do a massive HIIT train session, I think is probably a little bit absurd. And some of those people who are just coming off of their couches, something like a walk and just even walking 15 minutes a day, maybe then trying to stretch it to 30 minutes a day, that's going to be life changing for them. My advice when it comes to movement is just be realistic with yourself, know where you're at, be realistic. I think patience is also something that I think we have to preach quite a bit. I mean, we didn't get overweight overnight, so it's insane to expect that we're just going to drop the pounds in a couple of days or even a couple of weeks. So just patience, meet yourselves where you're at. My first recommendation is just get out and walk around your neighborhoods. And even if you're maybe a little more advanced in your fitness, but just walking for me, I find it to be incredibly meditative. So even walking in to your normal fitness regimen, going to have huge benefits. It's going to help with the fat burn. It's going to help, mental clarity. But then when you start down this road of fitness, again, our bodies are so adaptable to whatever we throw at it. So eventually you're going to plateau and maybe that 30-minute walk isn't going to be nearly enough. It's going to have to bump up to an hour. You're going to have to throw some resistance training in there. You're going to have to be pushing yourselves within reason. Mm-hmm. So just constantly mixing things up, pushing yourselves to the point that's healthy. That's really where people need to go. And you can fall into that continuum wherever your current lifestyle and fitness regimen or lack thereof is at. and just jump in and get started. That's the most important thing, is just do something. Shut off the dang television and go out and do something.
Get off your devices and go for a walk. Talking about devices, and we're talking a little bit about Garmin technology and activity trackers. I guess I speak a lot about managing your steps, and I guess starting by finding out how many steps you do a day and then seeing if you could do a little bit more. So I think that's a really nice way to start. Be like, all right, like, would you invest in a Fitbit or start looking at like an activity tracker on your smart device, and then actually seeing how much you're actually moving? Because you can picture some people's day is they wake up, they have breakfast, they get in their car, they drive to an office, they go sit in a chair all day, they have lunch at their desk, they drive home, then they sit on the couch. So they're really only walking from their house to their car to the office to the car, and then back home. So then if they wear a tracking device, they go, oh crap, I've only walked 700 steps today. And I guess we kind of repeat that. Maybe 10,000 steps is a good guide to aim for. So when you go, oh, I've only stepped 700 steps today, that's not good. We can at least start to modify that. I think that's a good starting point for most people, is just their steps, right?
Absolutely. And, you just brought up monitoring. Just monitoring in general is so important. I mean, if it's steps, if it's 700, if you can just do some quick, easy math and try to continually increase that goal, just easy things, try to get it up 10% every day. So just pull that 0 away from the 700, add 70 into it. So the next day, try to get 770 and keep building up to that. And, 10,000 steps should probably be our minimum, but, work up to that, especially if you're starting with 700.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, talking about nutrition, I guess nutrition gets into a slippery slope because I guess there's so many competing ideas around optimal nutrition. But I love how you brought up just fruits and vegetables. And I think that is the foundation of, in my eyes, optimal nutrition. Like, make sure you have loads of different fruits and vegetables of loads of different colors, and you'll get all the phytonutrients that you kind of know a lot more about than I do that you need. When it comes to nutrition, like, what advice would you give someone if they wanted to start trying to make it better, that idea of biohacking? Like, what could they do?
Yeah, it's funny, Coach Steve. That's probably the most popular question I get is, what is the best diet that's out there? And you're right, slippery slopes. And gosh, it almost turns into religion, doesn't it? And it's like you're trying to convert somebody from one religion to another. I don't have an answer. They all, in my opinion, have pros and cons. And if you can look at these agnostically, they all have pros and cons. And so, again, I just encourage people to just be in tune with their bodies. The food that we eat, its sole purpose is to bathe our cells with nutrients so that they can function. It's also supposed to provide the energy that we need every single day. So when you're eating any meal, no matter what it is, pay attention to how it's making you feel. So if you're eating lunch, for example, and you feel like you need to go down and lay a nap, well, guess what? That's probably not the best diet for you. Food should make us feel alive, should make us feel good and energized. And so really, it's a very individual decision. And it's maybe a little slow road of experimentation, but trying to figure out what works best for you. To a couple of your points, absolutely, the scientific data is clear. The more fruits and especially vegetables that we're eating, the better. I love how you also said try to eat as many different colored fruits and vegetables as possible. I mean, it's a little bit of a cheesy saying, but, really try to eat the rainbow. Those chemicals that give fruits and vegetables their color are also exactly the nutrients that are providing a lot of health benefits to our body. And actually, very interestingly, are some of those compounds that are working through some of those nutrigenomic pathways that we were talking about to also help you activate your cells. So I absolutely agree. Eat as many different fruits and vegetables as possible and as many different colors as possible.
Now, using that example of if you ate something and you kind of feel tired or lethargic afterwards, as I guess maybe a qualitative measure you can follow, are there any other things that people could start tracking in terms of their nutrition? Maybe in that idea of a qualitative data that they could be like, okay, I've eaten this and this is how I feel, this is good, or I've eaten this is how I feel, this might not be so good. Like, what could people start tracking around that?
Yeah, and maybe we get into another little bit of a taboo subject, but tracking calories, is that good or bad? I don't know. I think it's a good thing, especially if we're talking about weight management. It's a chore. People hate it, but I also think it's incredibly necessary. So when it comes to tracking, gosh, the best thing you could do is start to keep a little journal of what you're eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and don't leave out the snacks. You can't cheat those through. So as soon as you start writing down everything that you're eating, and you want to start trying. And you could even come up with some sort of little self-rating system like, oh, those chips I had for a snack in between lunch and dinner, probably not the best. So maybe give that a low score. If you had a great big salad for dinner, give that a high score, and then start tracking calories. I think a lot of people will be very surprised where their calories are coming from because, for example, it's not enough to just eat a salad and we drench it in, let's say, ranch or blue cheese dressing. I mean, you're going to have far more calories coming from the dressing than you ever would from that meal. But yeah, just start tracking everything. And again, being honest, if you really want to go down this journey of better health, losing weight, whatever it might be, track and be honest. And, you can start with 1 day. If it seems overwhelming, move to 3 days, 5 days. You can get up to 7-day diet recalls, they call them. And then if you really want to get advanced, there's different websites you can go to and even upload what you've ate to figure out the nutrient quality of the food, how many calories are there. And the other thing, again, a little bit taboo and a lot of fitness experts shy away from it, but it's also reading labels. I think people will be surprised how many calories might be in something or how nutrient poor something might be. So even if you're not necessarily studying it, but just taking the time to look a little bit at a label and just start to educate yourself. And it's interesting how you'll start to know how many calories are in something once you get used to reading these different labels. This just came up in our house the other day. My wife is just absolutely amazing. She cooks us dinner every single night. And she said, oh, hey, Brian, look, tonight I cooked with these gluten-free noodles. And she was all proud and all happy. And she thought, oh, this is so great. And I said, baby, you know what? There's going to have exactly the same number of calories as just traditional pasta. And she says, no, come on, you're kidding. So sure enough, we went to the cupboard, pulled out the two different labels and put them side by side. And they were almost identical in calories. And so that was an eye-opening experience for her. And I think a lot of people will be eye-opened when they start reading labels.
Yeah. One thing that got me early in my fitness career was someone gave me a protein bar. I was like, oh, this is great. It's a protein bar. And then they also gave me like a Snickers bar, right? And they showed me the label and it was actually really similar. And I kind of was so confused where I kind of get this preached message of, something like a protein bar or maybe a granola bar or something like that is being of a good food. And then you compare that to like a Snickers bar or a candy bar or something like that, and that's being a bad food. And you look at the nutrition in it and it's like, well, the calories are almost the same. They both have a fair bit of protein in it. And then this also has a bit of sugar. Then I lost it, man. That was a tipping point for me.
I've done that exact same thing. It's wild, isn't it? And that's the knowledge that you're empowered with when you start reading labels.
Mm-hmm. But moving on, mate, I want to talk about the next point of community and that idea of a tribe and how it's so important being around people, both because of this physical connection, this emotional connection we get with people and how that could influence not only our mental state, but our nutrition state. And I guess we speak about it a lot within the challenge. We're an online body transformation challenge. So we're kind of connecting people all around Australia to try to meet up. And we're commonly speaking to people about, let's do a meetup together. Let's do a workout together. Let's try to form these bonds online. Can you speak a little bit about some of the effects of being around people and improving our health outcomes?
Yeah, community is something I'm absolutely fascinated with right now. Around the world, there's these longevity hotspots, they call them, or other people are starting to refer to them as blue zones, but whatever you want to call them. So researchers, my background is in studying the aging process. And so this is something that's very interesting to me. So researchers, like myself, would go to these different hotspots and they would try to figure out what is the thing that these different communities are doing to increase their lifespan. And what's so interesting is a lot of it initially was centered around diet. And these have been a lot of the recent diet fads that maybe we've seen. I mean, I would say it all started with the French paradox with drinking red wine. I mean, how everyone started giving themselves the excuse to drink red wine because it was healthy and going to make you live forever. And there's a couple other hotspots around the Mediterranean in Italy and Greece. That's where the Mediterranean diet came from. There's another longevity hotspot in Japan. Well, where do you think the sushi trend came from? There's another interesting one in California that no one can really figure out what they're doing, right? They're just a different mix of people over there in California. But when they look at these different hotspots around the world, the one thing they have in common, it's not diet, it's community. So for example, in Japan, there's this reveredness like for the elderly. So the elderly are revered as just all knowledgeable, and they never let them sit home alone. They're always dragging them out to kind of this big social centers, and they're just getting together with friends and family and as a community. I mean, I don't know if anyone's been to Italy or even France, but you're hard pressed to have lunch in under 2 hours, and to have a dinner under 4 hours is almost impossible. They just get together and they have these huge celebrations around food with friends and family. I mean, you can probably picture, even if you just see it in a movie, how big are their dinner tables, and they're just jam packed. So the one unifier in all of these different longevity hotspots is this notion of community, and community from the youngest in the community to the oldest in the community, and just bringing everyone together and keeping everyone engaged and happy. And I think we all know that happy person that's around us, that they just feel and look invincible. And, laughter, happiness, it's contagious. And I think that contagion feeds through these different communities. And so I applaud you for getting that online community together, that social interaction, that holding everyone together. It's just invaluable.
Totally agree. Let's talk about sleep. I've actually done a podcast kind of summarizing the book by Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep, but it's becoming, I guess, more important now because we spend so much time on our devices. People are up in the middle of the night scrolling and watching Netflix and everything in between. So I think optimizing, or at least getting to sleep, is so important. And I love what you kind of spoke about, how waking up to no alarm is kind of a really great thing, because I guess we can start to see what our normal circadian rhythm is, like what our normal bedtime is and what our normal wake time is. Let's say someone wanted to transition to trying to wake up without an alarm. What kind of advice would you give someone there?
So speaking of biohacking, I call it a random insomniac. So there'll be times when I'll sleep really, really well, and then I'll go on a stretch of 3 to 4 days where I'm just sleeping terribly. And those days are just absolutely miserable for me. And so I've been on this mission for, I don't know how many years, 5 or 10 years, to just try to optimize my sleep. Some things that I've found that work amazing for me is I'm really sensitive to when I'm having my last maybe cup of coffee or other caffeine intake for the day. I have a hard stop at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I just know if I have it later, it's going to negatively affect my sleep. I'll be careful with alcohol consumption as well. It puts you to sleep, but it doesn't keep you to sleep, and you don't get good restful sleep. Other things I've incorporated are, putting the devices down, that light that's coming from our phones. And even if if you have a TV in your room and it's off, a lot of them still have like a little blue light that's shining on them, and it'll light up the whole room. And that blue light turns out to be the exact same wavelength that ends up destroying melatonin through the eyes. So if you have to have a TV in your room, maybe put a piece of tape or something over it, but just shut electronics off, start dimming lights as you want to start to wind down for bed. I use blackout blinds on my windows. I've invested significant amount of money in my mattress. We spend so many hours a day in bed. Be comfortable, spend a few bucks and be comfortable in bed. Try to cool the house off at night as just part of our circadian rhythm. Our body temperature drops, so we can help facilitate sleep by lowering the temperature. So I did all these things to ultimately fall asleep, but then I ran into this pickle of then how do I wake up in the morning if I needed to? Some interesting research that's coming out, and some of these tracking devices we're talking about have really been interesting, and they're trying to track your specific wake cycles, and then they will sync with an app and they will wake you up at the right time in your sleep cycle so that you don't wake up all startled and maybe disgruntled. One thing that I've incorporated is using a light alarm, so LIGHT. So it really just slowly gets more and more bright. So then it just lightens up the room, and it's supposed to mirror the sunrise. And what a great, pleasant way to wake up. You kind of just start blinking your eyes and you look around and it's light in your room. You're not startled by that alarm going off. That's been great. So those are a few tips that I've incorporated to try to help with my sleep.
Love it. Mate, you spoke a little bit about mindfulness and being present. And I think when we kind of think about mindfulness, we always kind of think about, I'm going to go and meditate and this type of thing. But that idea of just being mindful of your environment. So starting to think about the smells that are around you, the views that are around you, or even the food that you're eating, and being present while you're eating is just so important, because you're kind of missing out on all these things. And we spoke a little bit about, being on devices or watching TV and stuff like that. And you kind of miss out on everything in between. So my question first is, when someone talks about mindfulness, like what do you kind of describe it as? And then the next step would be, how would you encourage someone to be more mindful day to day?
Yeah, how do I describe mindfulness? It's just simply being present. And maybe the best thing I can point to is some research that's been centered around multitasking. I think a lot of us, I bet, Coach Steve, if I asked you, I bet you would say that, yeah, you're a great multitasker. I would have said the same thing as well. I mean, I'm going back and forth between my computer, email, my phone, text messages, plus the work I've got to get done in the day. Well, some interesting research has shown that really that's a complete myth, and only 1% to 2% of the population are actually these quote unquote multitaskers. And even more ironically, it tends to be just women. So if you're male, I'm sorry guys, but you're not multitaskers. So I think that's probably like the best science that points to the importance of mindfulness. Of course, yoga is one way to be mindful and, be mindful in your exercise. It helps you get introspective as well. But what if we applied those same principles to just everyday life? I mean, maybe for me at work, I just need to make sure I'm focusing on one task, putting my phone on silent, shutting off my email so that it's not beeping along. We're talking about the food that we're putting in our faces. I mean, if you really sit there and maybe think about chewing your food and what is the taste like, thinking about how many calories are going in, it's incredibly beneficial. And it's beneficial for a number of ways. You're cognizant of the number of calories that you're putting in your face. But again, coming back to weight management, it's been shown that the slower that you eat, the fewer calories that you'll consume. So if you're present with your food, you might push that plate away. Be mindful about the choices that you're making. I like to break everything down into just these binary decisions. So either this or that. And so if you're just mindful about this decision might be a little bit healthier than that decision. And if you're making the healthier choice more often than not, choosing to go for a walk instead of choosing to watch TV, right, you're going to start to snowball your health. And you can literally apply this to every aspect of our health, from eating to exercise to just being maybe better husbands, boyfriends, parents, whatever you want to be. Just be present, put those distractions down, and it will improve your life immensely.
I love it. One thing I picked up from reading Aubrey Marcus's book was the idea of a perfect bite. So he kind of spoke about, before you eat, try to make the perfect spoon or fork of food. Try to have a little bit of all the little bits of food you're about to eat. Take a moment to look at it, smell it, and then taste it. And it's like this kind of ritual while you're eating. And it's something that I do more often than not, is when I go to eat, I'm making this like fancy little bite of food and my partner just looks at me like I'm a weirdo, but I kind of like have this little ritual now. But I love that I was able to incorporate this little habit just to slow it down, because myself, like I got food in front of me, I gorge it. So for me, just trying to slow down was a big change to my own health. But I love that idea.
That's very cool. And at our core, we're primitive beasts. I mean, think even 100 years ago, around the year 1900, we weren't guaranteed that we were going to get a meal every single breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So when food was in front of us, our bodies go into the survival mode to just get as much food down our face as possible. Think about lions on the plains of Africa. When they get a kill, they gorge themselves and then literally go a couple meters away and just go take a nap for a couple hours to digest that food. Like, we're wired that same way. So slowing down your eating is something incredible to do. And maybe another word of caution is the trick of appetizers. So appetizers, when you go to a restaurant, they want you to order those appetizers because it kicks in that primitive mode of just, oh, now I'm super hungry, and you want to order more food, eat more food. So they're getting you psychologically with those appetizers.
Yeah, I recently had a trip to Singapore, and if you've been to Southeast Asia, everything's chopsticks, right? And I found with chopsticks, I was just having to eat so much slower than normal. And I found that I was just getting crazy full. And it's just like more of a mission and I guess a journey to eat the food. And I think I don't know much about the cognitive side of it, but simply slowing it down, spending a bit more time trying to pick up that little bit of a noodle or a bit of rice and such was, it's just a different experience to me. So I guess listening to this, if you want a different eating experience, just try eating with chopsticks for a couple of days, and that will just change your mindset when you're trying to eat food.
I love it. And, like when you're talking about making those little works of art on your fork or your spoon or eating with chopsticks, that's biohacking. You're trying to optimize your biology, the way you're eating, trying to slow down. Like, there you go. It doesn't have to be these big fancy technological things. You're doing it.
Last thing here, your environment. And you spoke a little bit about plastics and the kind of build-up of maybe some toxic metals and such that we kind of speak about a little bit and things. So when we're talking about plastics, you would recommend drinking out of like glass and eating off of glass plates. Are there other ways that plastics or heavy metals can make their way into our foods without us being aware of it?
Oh, other ways outside of dishes. Well, it's just, really how everything is stored. I mean, even though I may not be eating out of plastic dishes or cups, if our food is stored in maybe unhealthy ways, I mean, that stuff just all kind of leaches around. And that philosophy for me, there are some studies out there showing that obviously these chemicals can leach out of plastics and get into our food. But it really comes back to my days working in the laboratory, doing all these research. And when we're doing experiments and we're mixing these chemicals together, we're only ever using glass. And the reason is because the plastic is leaching out of whatever container we're using, and it can mess up your experiment. I have a super frustrating story where I wasted a couple months on an experiment that was working. And I didn't realize it, but I started using a different plastic container to store some things. And long story short, we're able to troubleshoot that the reason my experiment stopped working is because the chemicals I was using was leaching some of these chemicals out of the plastic, and it completely messed everything up. So that literally scared the heck out of me. And why I don't think we think about this more in our own homes is just, it's crazy to me. And again, not a lot of research, direct links. There's definitely some indirect links out there. It's just a personal decision. Yeah. So just, know where everything's coming from. Think about keeping your homes clean. Maybe that's leaving your shoes at the front door, cleaning with, maybe just vinegar, like a dilute vinegar solution instead of these nasty chemicals. I mean, literally everything that you're using throughout your daily life is contributing to what we call your toxic load or lack thereof. So from cleaners to toothpaste to shampoos to lotions, these things all add up over time. Open your windows up every day, get some air moving through there, get that bad air out and get that nice, healthy, natural air flowing through, and don't keep yourselves just cooped up inside. And especially, I think, in the era that we're all in right now, and as we're spending more and more time at home, it becomes increasingly important. So just think about your environment in every way. What are you spraying pesticides? Are you putting fertilizer on your lawn? I mean, it can go on and on and on, but these slow exposures, they add up over time. One, probably not a problem, but when we start to get 2, 3, 4, 5, et cetera, that stuff adds up, and it puts a burden on our systems, and especially our detoxification systems. And if we overload it, then that can go on to have severe consequences to our health.
Yeah. Well, I kind of wanted to speak a little bit about, I guess we preach a lot about meal prepping and prepping your food in advance. And often that food ends up in a little plastic reusable container and it gets stored in the fridge or the freezer, and we kind of eat out of it and everything. So I guess there are maybe some people in our community that might be at a higher risk of compounding these, I will use the word toxins that you kind of spoke about. I guess my question is, what would be an early sign that we are starting to reach like a higher threshold of maybe like a toxic overload? Like what kind of signs? Is it just purely like feeling lethargic and tired, or what kind of things could people be looking out for?
Yeah, and that's an interesting juxtaposition for sure. The meal prepping is just, it's so healthy. You're taking a day or part of a day and cooking healthy meals so that you have them throughout the week so that you're not reaching for those unhealthy foods. And again, I don't want to scare anybody. And I think it really comes down to your overall load. Mm-hmm. So maybe you're doing a lot of other things right in your life. And if the worst thing you're doing is meal prepping and storing in plastic dishes, that really doesn't concern me. It's just when maybe we're microwaving our dinners day after day, meal after meal. If we're using these usually super fancy cosmetics or just chock full of terrible toxins. But to answer your question specifically, things that we might notice are the lethargy that you talked about. So feeling a little bit more lethargic. Maybe you feel like you just want to lay in bed. Maybe you need that nap in the middle of the afternoon. Probably where somebody might experience this sort of overload buildup might be in kind of mental clarity and sharpness. But the hard thing is, it is really hard to identify because these are really slow kind of slides that happen. So you don't really notice it until maybe one day you kind of wake up and you're like, gosh, I'm just not feeling as sharp as I used to be. But the nice thing about our bodies is they have this amazing regenerative capacity. So if we can start to identify as maybe our health starts to slide a little bit from whatever reason, our bodies are constantly turning over. So if we can turn our overall lifestyles around and including these 6 various pillars of health, man, our bodies can bounce right back from that. So it's literally never too late to start wherever anyone's at. And, if you're concerned maybe about what you've been doing in your life, maybe indulging a little too much in alcohol, maybe just living out of plastics or whatever it might be, it's never too late to start and just slowly, again, make those decisions into binary decisions and just continually try to choose the healthier one, the healthier one, the healthier one. And before you know it, you're a complete health nut and you'll be well on your way.
I love it. Well, I guess in summary, I think when we start this process of trying to improve our health, a common barrier we get is this idea that I don't have control over these things. And, we can kind of talk about like the locus of control and such. But I think kind of like the 6 points that we've kind of spoken about today are things that people could start like right now, slowly starting to change. And I think you would agree, like we don't expect people to go out and change everything all at once. But if you can feel like you have more power over these things, like, okay, like what if I could swap out this plastic water bottle for a glass water bottle? What if I could go for a walk or park my car a little bit further away? What if I could have 1 extra fruit or vegetable a day? Like what if I could put a little bit of tape over that TV in my bedroom, or even better, get the TV out of the bedroom? So I think these small steps add up over time. And then once you've got this good foundation, we can take it that next bit and really try to optimize over time, right?
Yeah, I exactly agree. And, kind of what you were laying out was, again, just breaking those down into simple decisions. Do I park close to the front door or do I park further away? Should I have maybe some more potatoes or rice with my dinner, or maybe should I get an extra serving of vegetables? So just breaking those down into the most simple choices. Because if you think about, oh my gosh, if I want to look like you, Coach Steve, I got to do all of these things. It'll seem like an impossible, overwhelming, Herculean task that could never be accomplished. But you didn't learn everything overnight. I spent way too much time in school learning these ridiculous facts that I know, but it just takes time. And as we start to incorporate these healthy decisions, just one by one, they snowball. And then day by day, they become habits. And then by definition, healthy habits increase health. And that's how people are going to improve their physical condition.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brian, we spoke about a lot of things here. If someone was interested in getting in contact with you and your work, or getting in contact with Lifevantage from Australia, what steps could somebody take to reach out or to look at some of the products that Lifevantage offers?
Oh, yeah. No, I appreciate that. So, welcome to connect with anybody. You can find me on Facebook. Not so good on Instagram. I'm trying to get better, but it's just Brian M. Dixon on both of those handles. You can also connect with Lifevantage on every social media platform. So if you just go to whatever your favorite might be, just search for Lifevantage. And we talk a little bit about our products, but really our goal is exactly the things we've been talking about today. We want to empower people to lead healthy lifestyles. Nothing's more, just makes me happy and know that I'm going down the right path. When someone comes up to me and says, something that you said really inspired me and I've lost, 30 kilos or something. That's just my best thing. And that's our philosophy at Lifevantage, is try to roll out these little daily tips of exactly the 6 pillars that we were talking about to try to empower people to live their best healthy life.
I love it. Thank you so much. Well, mate, let's wrap it up there. Thank you so much for donating your time to be part of the Challenge podcast. And I'll put your details in the show notes here for someone to connect with you. And I'm looking forward to working with you in the future sometime.
Yeah, thanks, Coach Steve. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening, guys. If you like the show, share it with a friend or leave us a review on iTunes to help us spread the good word.
See you next time.